Hello, young St. Peter's friends. Welcome to Time Up Front. This is the last Sunday before Easter. It's called Palm Sunday, and it's our last Sunday of Lent. And so we have one more time the purple cloth to help us to make our journey of our simple time towards Easter. The week to come is called Holy Week. It's the week when we remember the days before Jesus died and was raised to new life. We remember these days because the stories of them help us to think about our own lives and make good choices. We wanted to tell you the stories of Holy Week at the church, where we would have a little story up at the front, and then we would walk around the sanctuary and then come back for another one and walk again. And so we wanted to call this time our Holy Week walk. But we're not at the church. So I'm going to invite you to have your Holy Week walk where you are. And instead of walking around the church, you can walk around your kitchen or your table or even your chair. Just pause the video and make your walk. You might need some things that perhaps your parents have ready for you. You don't have to have these things, but I thought I'd like to share with you the kinds of symbols that I have for you today. And if you have them at home, that's great. And if you don't, that's okay too. The things that we are needing are a cedar branch or a palm craft that we've made or a piece of paper to wave for our palm walk. You might want a glass of grape juice or water or some other kind of juice or milk. You might want to have something called haroset. It's a mixture of apples and cinnamon, and a little bit of honey maybe, a little bit of juice, and some people put raisins and nuts in it. You'll need a little bowl of salt water and something green that you can dip in it, like celery leaves or parsley or lettuce. You might also want to have a pitcher of water and a bowl and a little towel. And you might also want to have a piece of bread handy. We will be using these things for our walk. Now, the first part of the story is our Palm Parade. This is the time when we remember Jesus going into the city of Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover with his friends. This special celebration remembers the time when Jesus' people, long before he was born, were slaves in Egypt. At this time, God called people named Moses and Aaron and Miriam to help to set the people free. Now, Jesus' people also weren't free. They didn't have their own king and government. They had to do what the Roman emperor said. So that was kind of like being slaves. So when they gathered for the Passover, their prayers for freedom really came from their heart. When people got together, they wondered if maybe God would send somebody to help them to become more free. Some people thought that Jesus should be that leader. He was very popular because he was kind and loving, and he taught people about being fair and just. They thought he would be a good leader because he believed that people should have enough food and that they should have a place to live, that everyone should be treated properly, respectfully, and kindly. He was also very popular because everyone knew that his great love came from God. They thought he could be the leader too because he was not afraid to talk to people who had power. People trusted Jesus, and they thought maybe he would be the one. So the people who had the power, they didn't like Jesus. They were worried that they would lose their power. When Jesus went to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, the people who were the bosses ordered more soldiers to come. They wanted to be ready in case Jesus or anybody else decided that it was time to be free. They wanted to be ready to fight back. So at one end of town, there were soldiers riding into Jerusalem on horses with weapons, and probably kind of grumpy because they would be away from home for quite a long time. But at the other end of town, in came Jesus riding on a donkey. Now, when you're at a birthday party and afterwards you tell people about it, probably everybody at that party tells the story a slightly different way. Well, when this story is told in the Bible, the different storytellers tell it a slightly different way. Our storyteller today tells us that Jesus came in riding on a donkey and her colt. That's her child, a small donkey. Now, that would look very silly. But Jesus had a sense of humor, so I wouldn't be surprised if he actually did that. And it would look very different from soldiers coming in on horses with weapons. It was a way for Jesus to say that being at peace and having fun was the way that God wanted for people to live. When Jesus rode the donkeys, the people nearby cut some branches from the trees, and they made a parade, and they waved their branches, shouting, "Hosanna!" That's not a word we use very much. But Hosanna means God, save. And maybe they shouted Hosanna because with Jesus they felt alive and happy, and they felt God's presence with them. And they wanted to feel that way more. We are told that it was a happy parade. When Jesus was around, everybody felt so much better. So every year we remember that parade, where we are told the children were a big part of the parade. And so usually at church, we wave our palm branches while the people sing Hosanna, loud Hosanna. And we make our little walk around the church. Today we're walking around the kitchen table or the chair or the hallway, whatever works for you. So you can take branches or a palm that you've created, or you can just wave your palms of your hands and call out Hosanna as you go up and down the hallway or around the kitchen table. So you can just pause the video and make your walk and then come back. Now I'm going to move the branches. And we are going to fast forward our way to Thursday night. We call that night Holy Thursday or Maundy Thursday. And again, Maundy is a funny word, but it comes from a word that means mandate or purpose. On this night, we remember two things. We remember Jesus' last Passover meal with his friends, and we usually do that with communion at church. And another thing we do on Maundy Thursday is to wash someone's feet. We remember the part of the story where Jesus did that. Now, when we have visitors come to our house, we usually take their jacket and hang it up so that they're comfortable while they're having their visit. In Jesus' time, they didn't have sturdy shoes like we did, so their feet would be dirty and they would be tired because they would have walked quite a distance, even if they were in the same village. And so someone washed the people's feet when they came in for a visit. Sometimes it was a servant, if somebody had the servant. Well, when Jesus got together with his friends for this Passover supper, he was the one who got the water and the basin and the towel and washed the feet of his friends. Now, his friend Peter didn't think this was right at all. I mean, Jesus was an important teacher, and he was not a servant. So Peter didn't think this was right. But Jesus said, no. This was one of the most important things that you could learn if you were going to be his friend. And so Peter said, "Great, wash my head, wash my hands, wash my whole body." And Jesus said, "No, feet are good enough." And then Jesus, when he was finished, said to his friends, "I am giving you a new commandment, a mandate, a purpose. Love one another. Love one another as I have loved you." And this washing of your feet is a sign of that. It's a symbol. If you remember only one thing that I ever taught you, it's to love one another. And so, on Thursday night before Easter, every year we gather in the church and I wash somebody's feet. But not this year. On Thursday, I hope that your family would like to get together with a basin and a jug of water and pour water on each other's feet to remember this important part of Jesus' teaching. But today, if you have a bowl and some water and a little towel, I invite you to just pour some water over each other's hands. This is an important part of loving each other, especially at this time when we need to stay healthy and to wash our own hands a lot. It's a good symbol of loving one another. So I invite you once again, if you would like to pause the video, to pour a little water over someone's hands, and then wipe them dry. And this way we remember Jesus giving us this purpose, to love one another. You can pause the video and do that now, and then come back. Now, after the foot washing, Jesus and his friends had their Passover meal. I'm going to move the water too. Now, the Passover meal is a time when there are some ceremonies and prayers before and after the dinner, and then a lovely dinner in between. And in those prayers and ceremonies, the people remember being slaves in Egypt, praying for people who are not free, and thanking God for the goodness in life. In the ceremonies, there are symbols that remind people of these things. Now, one of the symbols is something called haroset. And this is my little mixture of apples and cinnamon and honey and juice, and I think I put some raisins in there. The haroset reminds us of the mortar for making bricks. And making bricks was what those slaves had to do long ago. So this helps us to remember them, to think of them, and also to remember all people who are slaves or who work very hard for very little money. My son Isaac works in a store, and one of the things that he does in the evening is to wash the shelves of the store and to keep things clean in that store so when people come in, they can stay as healthy as possible. Lots of people do things like this that we don't see, that we don't think about, things that are invisible work. When we have the haroset, we remember all the people who work for us that we might not see, work that is not recognized. So we might today think about doctors and nurses, people who work for us all the time, people who clean the bathrooms in the hospital. Sometimes we don't think about that. Or people who keep stores clean, or the things on the shelves that we need to buy. Lots of people are doing their jobs from home right now, taking care of their families and working hard. Lots of people work hard, and lots of them are people we don't even think about because we don't see them working. So the Harisette reminds us not just of slavery, but of all the work that is done that we don't see, and so we don't really appreciate it. When it was time for those long ago slaves to go to freedom, Jesus' people promised to remember the work that was done. So I invite you to take a spoon, if you have one, and take a little spoonful of the Harisette and think about all the people who are working for us at this time that we don't even know about, that we don't see. So I'm going to take a little bit of Harisette and I'm going to have a bite. So I invite you now again to pause the video, have your Harisette, and then walk around the table and come back here and start the video again. There, I think that's a good place for the Harisette. Can we see it? A little bit. Okay. When it was time for those slaves to leave and to run to freedom, there wasn't time for the bread that they were baking to rise. So they took unleavened bread. That means it didn't have time to rise up and become fluffy. And it would also last a little bit longer on the journey and keep them strong for all the walking that they had to do, because they had to walk. So on Jesus' table at the Passover, to remember that, they would have some bread. Mine is some pita bread. Yours could be any kind of bread or cracker. Now, when Jesus ate the bread with his friends at the Passover, there are ceremonies throughout the dinner. And one of the things that happens is that a person takes the special bread. It's called matzah, but I didn't have any. They take the bread and they make a prayer that says, "Blessed are you, Spirit of life, provider of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth." Does that remind you of anything? God is thanked for all the things of the earth. God is thanked for all the things that help to make bread. The sunshine, the rain, the earth, the seeds, the farmers. And God is thanked for the strength that the bread gives to our body. If you have a piece of bread or a cracker handy, this would be a good time to take a piece, to lift it up in thanksgiving for our food, and in thanksgiving for all the things that make us strong for our journey. And then you can eat it. It's good. And it's good to feel full and be strong. So take some time now to eat your bread, stop the video, and take your walk around the table or up and down the hall and come back for the next one. Now, our next symbol, if I can get it, there we go, is something called karpas. Now, the karpas is a bowl of salty water. I don't know if you can see my salt in there, but there's salty water and a little piece of something green. I had some celery in my fridge, so that's what I got. The salty water represents the salty tears that were shed by the people who were slaves. It is important to remember that. It helps us to feel compassion and softness in our own hearts for all people who are having a difficult time and all people who need to be free. The green part is a reminder that even when there are hard times, goodness can be found. Even though people were slaves, they believed that God was working to raise up leaders to help them. They believed that God was working in the world and that all the things that sustained them came from God. They believed that the love that they had for each other was a part of God's love. And so God was not gone. God was present in their love. And so the green stuff, lettuce, parsley, a little bit of celery, is dipped in the salt water to remember both things, the sadness of the hard life and the goodness that seems to be around us even in hard times. So even if you're feeling upset about having to be home and not see your friends and not go to school, look for the good things and appreciate the love of your family. There is good, even in the midst of hard times. So the karpas, or the green with the salt, helps us to remember also to be one of the good things that is shared in hard times. Maybe we can be kind to one another. Maybe we can send a note to somebody who's lonely. We can be the good in a hard time. So if you have it, dip the green in the salty water and take a little bite. You can taste the fresh and the salt. And after you've taken your little bite, pause the video and walk around the table again or up and down the hall and come back for our next symbol. Now, the cup of wine. At a Passover supper, there are, as I said, ceremonies and prayers. And these ceremonies need 4 cups of wine or juice. At each cup are blessings and thanksgiving, so much thanksgiving. Thanksgiving for freedom, for life, for creation, for the festival of Passover, for the gift of being together. There is thanksgiving for God's presence and God's love, and for all the loving that has happened in the world over time. There is thanksgiving for fruit that is made into juice or wine because it reminds us, like the bread, of God's goodness. It reminds us also of God's companionship, God being with us. Even though Jesus and his people were not completely free, they still celebrated God's faithfulness, trusting that God was still at work. Thankful for all the blessings of the earth and of their families and their friends. It's a wonderful lesson for all of us. So I invite you to drink whatever is in your cup in thankfulness for the earth, for our families and for our friends, for the coming of spring, for the people who are helping us to stay safe, for the stories that we have of God's faithfulness to us through the ages. This is what Jesus did on the night before he was handed over to the things that led to his dying. He lifted the cup and he gave thanks. So, whatever you might have in your cup, mine is cherry and cranberry juice, lift your glass with a thankful heart and drink up. Now you can pause the video for one more spin around the table or up and down the hall, and then come back for one more symbol. Now I'm making room here for our last symbol. It's getting to be a full table, isn't it? Our last church time before Easter is called Good Friday. It's kind of weird for a day that is so sad to be called Good Friday. But God also did good things, even on a bad day. You see, people were really mean to Jesus after his Passover supper. It's kind of a long and complicated story. But mostly, it's that Jesus got accused of being bad and doing wrong things that he didn't do. But he was accused of it, and nobody helped him. Nobody stood up for him. And he was killed on a cross because that's what happened to people who were criminals in that day. Nobody helped him. Nobody stood up for him. Nobody would tell the powerful people to stop. Nobody would tell the powerful people that they were wrong. That's the bad part. Nobody helped, and Jesus died. But the good part of Good Friday is that Jesus tried to help himself by using his words. He would not use violence. And he did not want his people to use violence either. The other good part about Good Friday is that he forgave the people who hurt him. And he taught us by doing that we can also learn to forgive people who hurt us. Jesus showed love to everyone, including himself. He tried to talk to the people about what was right. Unfortunately, there were too many powerful people who did not do the right thing. On Good Friday, we remember this story, and it helps us to remember to be the people who do the right thing, people who will speak up for others when they're being bullied, and who do things like speak up and write letters to the Prime Minister or other people in power, like we did earlier this year, when we wrote letters to make sure that our government would give First Nations children the same rights as every other child. The cross reminds us of these things. I have a cross to show you. On this cross, there are pictures. There is somebody at the bottom growing corn for people to eat. There is a picture of someone beside a lake. There are kids getting ready for school and getting ready to play. At the top, there is a kite up in the sky, and you can't see it, but the string is attached to this child here. And there's Jesus with the children in the middle, with his arms around them, showing his love. This cross shows a world of peace and kindness and joy and love. The things that Jesus teaches us help us to become the kind of people who help the world to be this way. So, that's what we do in Holy Week. We remember the important stories. They help us to be thankful. They teach us about being the good in the world. And they remind us that God's love is powerful, even in difficult days. Now, after Holy Week comes Easter. And then we see what God did with both the good and the bad of the Holy Week. I will see you then. Until that time, let us remember these stories and all the good things they teach us. Let us be thankful, even in our difficult time, for all the goodness that is in the world, in our families, and among our friends. Thank you for coming to Time Up Front. I'll see you next time.